Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Regal Live series. Regal Live series is a weekly live series that aims to enable coaches to build a prosperous coaching business by enabling them to become the best coaches that they can be. Regal Unlimited is a leadership development company that has over a decade of excellence in disrupting leadership development through coaching and coach training. In this edition of the Regal Live series, I'm glad and really happy to invite John Serrao. Thank you, John, for joining us today. John is the managing partner at Serrao and Associates. He brings more than 30 years of experience in finance, marketing, sales, legal, administration, training, facilitation, and coaching. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, Institute of Company Secretaries of India, ICF-CC, and a certified mentor coach from 𝐕CHange USA, among many other hats that John so very well wears. He has a rich corporate and consulting experience, having closely worked with many Fortune 500 companies. In today's session, we discuss how can coaching presence support clients. Now I invite John to take us through the ICF Coaching Competency 5 in his inimitable manner. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Anirudh. So I wanted to share a little bit about coaching presence today and why it is such an important aspect of coaching. Normally, if you think about coaching and coaches, and I remember the time when I first became a coach, I had all these thoughts coursing in my mind. Things like, what question should I ask? How do I know that the client will get the outcome they're looking for? Or how is the client viewing me as a coach? What are they thinking about me? And so I was, and in the process, what happened was I was sacrificing my entire presence. Because I was so conscious about the outcome, there was a disconnect with my clients. And the reason why I think this competency is extremely important is because your presence enables your clients to be able to open up more, trust you more, share with you more. Then, you having the right question or you being preoccupied with your thoughts or with the outcome that you're looking for or with any distractions that might be there. And so it's really being what I call as being physically, mentally, and emotionally present for your clients to a point where you almost enter into a mindful state of sorts, where there is nobody else in front of you except your client and nothing else. What happens is that if we are not present and we are, we have all these thoughts running in our mind, our clients will sense the fact that we are not with them as coaches. And somewhere a lack of trust will start creeping up. And what we need to do is to be able to build that trust. There will be a trust deficit if you're not aware, present, and listening. But the moment you are there, present, aware, listening to them, they will start to trust you and they will start opening up, and that will enable them to be able to figure out the things that they have come to you for coaching. So I wanted to pause here, Anirudh, and check in with you if there are any questions from you before we move forward.
Thank you, John. Dear viewers, we are open to taking up questions. If you have, I'm anyway looking through the chat box. Please let me know. I will raise it for John. Meanwhile, John, I have a couple of tangents to take this conversation forward, but I will take the first one that comes to my mind. You very beautifully mentioned that being present at all levels of existence, physical, mental, and emotional and sorts, right? So in this age where we are constantly battling so many distractions and where we have a declining attention span, like this live also, just to cater, we are restricting it in 20 minutes, right? We're sticking to 20 minutes. How can a coach be present when there are so many distractions that may happen even during a conversation? What would be your take on that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And you're right that today Given the fact that we have smartphones on our hand, and today, aside from Miss Google, we have Mr. Chat GPT also there in the fray. And therefore, it opens up a complete Pandora's box of thoughts and distractions and what have you. But I think if we want to be coaches, then we have to train ourselves and learn to be present. It is an intentional activity, and it is no different from an exercise in mindfulness, for example. If we can practice mindfulness, if we can learn to focus on our breath, for example, for a few minutes, we can train ourselves to be present completely to our clients.
So, John, you mentioned how being present is directly linked to cultivating trust, which is so important in a conversation.
Yeah.
So, in our daily conversations, sadly, we see that not everyone is present.
Yeah.
So, what is so special about, what is the link between trust and being something as human as present in a conversation?
So the thing is that imagine, Anirudh, that you have somebody who's talking to you. But as you're sharing something personal and private, the person is on his phone, he's checking his email, he's picking up calls, he is talking to a few people who drop by. How would you feel as a person? Forget as a client.
Not respected enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? The same thing happens. But imagine a scenario where the person at the other end keeps away every distraction and makes you the sole person in his universe. How might that experience feel like?
That will be magical.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's the job that we have as coaches. If we can do that, we can further our coaching far more than the greatest or the best questions that we can bring to bear in a coaching conversation, or try to figure out a way of how they should get their outcome, or what have you. It is just that presence that would enable the coaching to actually, in many ways, open up by itself, as it were.
Thank you, John, for touching something so critical to human existence, that need to just be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. The need to be heard. You said it.
So I was having a conversation with a fellow coach yesterday, and what she raised is something that many of us coaches experience in our coaching conversations. I would link two of these facets together and leave it to you on how to deal with them. Very often, when a client brings something very personal, right, there's judgment, and then there is some unhealed scar, if I may say so, that conversation may trigger.
Yeah.
How, as a coach, can we ensure that we're not getting drawn into that and remain present?
Yeah. So, and that's precisely the kind of things that being present will enable, Anirudh. The fact that when somebody comes to you, share something private, it triggers a few things. But can you come back? And it does. We are human, right? We will start judging. Can you be intentional about being non-judgmental? Right? I find it very useful to think of it like this: that I'm quite capable of doing the very same thing that my client is sharing with me. How am I any different? And that keeps me grounded. So that's one way to deal with judgment. And the second is this fact that, we all go through pain, right? But this is not about me. This is about my client. It's time for me to focus on my client and their pain and their problems, less about me. And therefore, I need to be intentional about being present. And therefore, it's a muscle that we need to exercise regularly and bring it to bear in our coaching conversations. And the beauty, Anirudh, is that everyday life offers us ample opportunities to exercise this muscle. And we can bring that same presence to bear in every conversation, whether it's with our partner, with our children, with a colleague, with a friend, with a extended family member, or somebody on the street.
Now, John, that is fantastic. That actually leads to the next question that I had in mind, and you just gave me the perfect hook to that. So if I may summarize, if I understand correctly, it is being grateful for what the client is sharing, to have awareness that it's about them, and to have the intention that we are here to just be present.
Yeah.
This would be what we have to focus on.
Yes. Yes. In fact, I remember, this thing shifted for me. Well, first is when I was undergoing my MCC journey, when my mentor coach Cindy started with coaching presence as the first topic, in a 75-hour, program. And I wondered why. Because I thought she would focus on listening and asking those great questions and all of that. And I understood it many, many years later. The second thing that shift happened was when I read an innocuous quote. Sometimes these innocuous quotes create a shift in our being. And one of those that I read was by Dr. Marcia Reynolds, where she said that mastery in coaching is not perfecting your skills, but deepening your presence. And for me, that statement had a profound impact on me and then on coaching presence in my life.
So John, if I may dare say, if you take care of this one coaching competency,
yes,
as the keystone habit,
yes,
it can set you up for success in the entire coaching framework.
So so that's a good question. If we are able to keep this as a keystone habit, then as a coach, you will notice the conversation from end to end. You'll be able to red thread different things. You'll be able to pick up conflicts. You'll be able to pick up energy shifts, changes in timbre, in the pitch, in the pace, right? In body language, for example. You will be able to present those conflicts back to the client and enable them to see through their own lens where they have been contradicting themselves, or where they are not able to see those conflicts. And in many ways, it will kind of give you a bird view of the conversation from, like I said, from end to end, because you are completely present to the client. So yes, as a keystone habit, I think this is worth perfecting, worth working on, worth being intentional about.
So, John, at this juncture, we have a question.
Yes.
From Sanjeev. Yes. Sanjeev asks us how to master the little distraction that coaches may face when they need to parallelly think the next smart question. Yes.
Okay, so Sanjeev, so I'm going to answer this question in two ways. One is that we will all be distracted from time to time. I have found it useful to bring my attention back to my breath and limit the distraction, and that has helped me. So that is one way you can do that. And you may need to think of whether something like that, paying attention to a certain part of your body or a certain place in your body where you're feeling that distraction. And for me, just focusing on the breath helps. The second is, I don't want you to think of the next smart question. In fact, what I would say is that summarize it for the client very succinctly, and then use that summary to ask the question. The power of the question lies not in the smartness of the question, but in your presence that enables you to bring before the client what they have been sharing with you, and using that as a springboard for the next question. Your question can be very simple, but it can create profound shifts in the clients. And that is the kind of shift that we're looking for, not in the power of the question, but in the power of your presence that enables that shift to happen.
Thank you, John. We have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
But quickly, before we move to that, I just want to quickly touch base on a very beautiful point that you brought up, that mastery is also bringing that presence into our daily life. Each daily conversation gives us an opportunity to be present.
Yeah.
But in my limited experience of life, what I see that at home, or with family or with loved ones or with friends, is where the possibility of judgment can probably be very high.
Yeah.
So in those moments, how can you maintain presence?
Yeah, so then we have to remember that this is an opportunity. This is a place where we can practice. So practice being present. If you want to become a great coach, you need to practice the muscle of presence, being present, and non-judgment, and listening.
Sanjeev thanks us, John. He says there's one mistake we make to think too much forward versus being present at the moment.
Absolutely, Sanjeev. Just stay present, just be in that moment. Yeah.
So I have a question from JL. So JL says, he asks, what's the power of pause and silence in conversations? Would love to hear John's perspective.
Yeah. So, the way I like to describe this is, imagine that you're talking to another person and you rattle off like a, fast train. Now we are going to have a bullet train in Ahmedabad. But let's say you just rattle things off and give the other person no chance at all. How might such a tirade of words sound, right? Similarly, in music, for example, sometimes in music you have pauses and they create that tension, they create that reflection, they create the element of being able to settle in and slow down things. And therefore, there is a lot of power in the power of pause and silence, because it enables the client to continue to think. I know of coaches who will, the moment the client finishes talking, they are ready to ask the next question. So it's like literally they are just waiting for that. But can you not just pause? Don't worry about the question. Just pause. Enjoy the silence and see what else comes out from the client. Maybe the client is thinking of something deep, and your pause will enable them to go deeper and perhaps come up with a shift in their being or an insight.
So John, so beautifully you mentioned that it's more of, very often it becomes the coach's need to ask the right question.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Or the coaches need to prove themselves.
Performance pressure.
Yeah, this is nothing about you. This is all about the client. And if you can get yourself out of the way, you can actually have a great coaching conversation.
We have another question from Hema Bindu. She asks, any tips on how we can be present in the moment? If I may just add to that, John, before you get into a coaching conversation, I'm sure you practice some mindfulness to just ground yourself. Together, how would you like to answer that?
Yeah, so there are different ways that you can do that. I know that there are some people who would listen to a piece of music, for example. There are some people who might perform or practice some mindfulness activity. There might be some people who might, like, for example, one of the things I also, I play the saxophone. So sometimes I would just take out my saxophone and play for half an hour before a session. And when you're playing the saxophone, you can't be all over the place. You have to be present, right? So it's a nice way for you to be grounded and be present. But whatever works for you is something that you can do before the session. In the session, it's really, the fact is that there is this client, there is you, and there is the space in between. And you've got to manage all of that. And you got to be present to all of that happening, because there is things happening within yourself as well. But those distractions, you need to get back, because the voices that come into our head are the ones related, let's say, performance or a question, or will the client get the outcome? The fact that the client is paying me and if they don't get the outcome, what will they think about me, right? All of those questions are invading our minds. Get them out of the way, because if you look at CC, what is it? CC2, I think, is which is to do with coaching mindset. That the clients are responsible for the outcome. So it's not your job. Your job is to be present and enable that outcome to flow. So that's some of the tips that I can share. I find focusing on my breath even during the session as very helpful.
Breath, of course. So simple yet so underrated.
Yes, yeah, it is simple and yet incredibly difficult.
John, as we come towards the end, quickly, one
Yes.
last question that we have is, how important is reflection post a coaching conversation?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. In fact, what I do is after the coaching conversation is over, I write a summary of the conversation. I don't take any notes in a coaching conversation, like absolutely zero notes, so that I can stay fully present. I don't even write words. And then after the session is over, I am able to recall all the important elements of a coaching conversation. But I also write whether I was present, for example. My first question is, was I present? Right? Was I listening? Was I threading the conversation? Right? Did I do the contracting markers 3.1 to 3.4? Did I do the action markers 8.1 to 8.9? I ask myself all those questions. Sometimes I miss some of those. But that's the growth that you're looking at, right? We are constantly being aware of that. And the fact that you miss means you make you tell yourself that next time you will do better. So I think it's very important.
Thank you, John, for this wonderful conversation today. I really enjoyed hosting you today, and we look forward to having many more sessions. Dear viewers, post the session also, John and I request John to please go through the comments, because I'm sure a lot of our viewers would comment on this post. He will be kind enough to answer. Dear viewers, see you next Thursday at 9 p.m. as we deep dive into coaching quotient, business quotient, and branding quotient with our dear coaches. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.